Hey, everybody. Welcome to the SavvyCast. I'm so grateful that you're here, whether you're listening or watching. And I have as my guest someone who's been on here before, and she is a fan favorite of everyone. And it's Sophie Hudson. Sophie, thank you for coming back again to be on the SavvyCast.
Thanks, Jamie. I love being with you. It's so fun.
Even though you're like, what, a mile down the street? We're
about a mile and a half, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So everyone, Sophie is beloved by many. She's got a very popular podcast. She has written myriad books, one of which we're going to talk about today. It's brand new. And she is also one of the best cooks in the world. And I love talking food with her. Sophie, I thought of you the other day because there's a shortage.
Oh, no.
Well, there's several shortages. And
Yeah.
I start channeling the Sophie of COVID when you and I were going back and forth, sharing what was where. Well, they've got meat here. Fresh Market's got this. Oh, there's a line. Hope we don't go through that again. I think the shortages are related more to other things than COVID, but I'm seeing them.
I know. And it's even, I don't know. I mean, we could go down this rabbit trail, but it's just, I told David the other day, I got back from the store, and it's really like what you said. You said to me, I don't know, about midway through quarantine, we're going to get to a point where you just kind of have to get what's available. And I feel like we're a little bit like that. Like, just your favorite brands may not be in stock, or weird things. Like we've talked about the Crystal Light thing. You just can't find everything that you might prefer at one time, but there's something, you can figure it out.
We can make do. Sophie, I don't think that I was asking this question of all my guests when you were on the podcast last. And everyone, Sophie and I did a podcast on our favorite Southern food and how to just bake basically anything when there's shortages. So if you haven't listened or watched, Sophie, were we even on Zoom? That my memory's so bad.
No, you weren't even doing Zoom yet, I don't think.
Okay, that's how long ago it was, but y'all check that podcast out. But Sophie, I now ask all of my guests to share what they would choose for their last meal. So what would you choose?
Oh gosh. I think I would want like classic Southern goodness. Like I would probably want chicken and dressing, some black eyed peas, some good corn, that kind of stuff. I wouldn't want one fancy thing. I wouldn't want any kind of anybody's filet. I don't need any kind of anything that takes days and days to prepare. But I would want something that felt like, I don't know, a Sunday lunch at my Mama Davis's house.
Yeah. Well, on that note, just Mama, you're mentioning your Mama, and I want to talk a little bit about Weeda Wednesday. But for those who may not know you, almost everyone knows you. Tell us a little bit about, just in a nutshell, who is Sophie Hudson? Just some of the stuff you do, where people can find you.
Oh, well, I guess the main thing I do is I write. So I've written some books, and then I've had a podcast for, I think at this point, 14 years. Melanie and I have had a podcast called the Big B Podcast. Or the Big B Cast. Now, we used to not record every week. So, there are years where there might be one episode. So as a podcast, I used to travel and speak a lot, but that's kind of not been a thing for the last little bit. And I don't know, I'm a mama and a wife, and I love to cook. It's probably my favorite way to wind down. To me, there's not much better. I think you would agree with this, like a good rainy day, and you've just been to the grocery store, and you can just get in your kitchen and just whatever, like sky's the limit. Like put on some music and get in there and cook. There is nothing as relaxing to me.
Well, and you are, because you just mentioned your mama, you are a Southern born and bred cook, and there's nothing like that. There's no culinary chef or experience that can beat the grandmothers, the great grandmothers, and you understand that very well. So who was the number one influence in your growing up years that made you love food, understand food, and know how to cook like you do today?
My mama, Weeda. Mama was just an amazing cook. It's funny because I was actually writing something about this yesterday. And Mama, when we were growing up, Daddy had a garden, and my Papa Davis had a garden, and like big gardens, not like a backyard garden, like huge gardens. And so Mama just cooked whatever Daddy brought inside. That's what we cooked. And then in the summer, whatever she didn't cook, she would put up. You put up butter beans, you put up
can
stuff. And she would can. She did squash pickle that was legendary. All kinds of different things. And so in the winter, she always had, we always had jars of canned tomatoes that she'd put up in the summer, fresh tomatoes that she would put up in the summer. So she bought very few canned goods, because everything was, she put up peas, she put up butter beans, all that kind of stuff.
Did she freeze or just can?
Oh, she froze, she canned, she
Did
preserved.
You have a deep freeze? She had a deep freeze.
She had a deep freeze. I can smell it right now. You know how a deep freeze back then smelled when the ice would condense on the back?
Yeah.
But so she was just a phenomenal cook of everyday food. And she just seasoned everything so well, and she loved doing it. So every meal felt like a special occasion with Mama. And then as she got older, she had a friend who had a bed and breakfast in my hometown. And she would also host, she had this big old Victorian house, and she would host these catered dinners, and not catered, but these like special event dinners in her house. And Edna, Mama's friend, would cook the food. And so Mama started to help her. And as Mama started to cook with Edna, she started to I don't know, she just kind of upped her game a little bit, and so she really started to love kind of American gourmet food, and to make some of those things. Nothing was precious or fancy, but just maybe the ingredients were a little bit different than the stuff that would come out of the garden. Mama didn't cook a lot of seafood when I was growing up, but she started to cook more seafood as she cooked with Edna, and just always like to do things beautiful table setting,
Oh, wow.
Beautiful glasses and all that kind of stuff.
Well, I know you are a phenomenal cook. Do you also put up?
No.
You can and freeze. I'm a freezer. If you told me to can something, I would kill someone with botulism. I would not know how to.
That's a whole process, but no, I don't really love to freeze, because here's why. I think it's because all the years when I was working at school, I would have something frozen, I'd forget to take it out in the morning, and it was of no use to me when I got home, like I didn't have anything when I got home. So but no, I've never canned. I've never, like Mama would make chow. She would make all kinds of different things. And I've never done that, but I might like to learn at some point.
Well, I feel like, at least in my world, it's a lost art. I don't personally, I think Iris O'Brien cans.
Right.
She brought me something, but other than that, I don't know anybody. And what a gift to receive canned tomatoes or canned peaches or whatever. So, wow. Well, and just on that note, I want to talk about Grace Upon Grace, but Weeda is your mom.
Yes.
And I've just got to tell everyone, okay, first of all, you have one of my favorite 3 Instagrams is yours. You are always,
So sweet.
It can be the worst day in the world, and you're always a bright spot. You're always funny. And the way you can explain how to cook anything. And Weeda Wednesday blows my mind. I feel like it takes me way too long to do a 3-step anything. And you're doing complicated. You're doing, well, to most people, and you're doing it all on Instagram. Do you just have the camera set up? How did
Jamie,
you do it?
It's such a train wreck.
Awesome.
And it takes a lot longer than it should. And it takes a lot longer than anybody would think, probably. Yeah, I just hold the camera and then I prop it up inside my cabinet. I bought one of those little, like, I don't know, like a lobster claw thing where you can, you put your camera in it. It's too much trouble to get it all set up. And I don't know. It's just easier to just film what I can and put it on the shelf when I can't, talk in between. But I really just like to make stuff that either mama made, or every once in a while I'll run across something and I'll think mama would have loved this. So occasionally I'll make that kind of stuff, but I don't know why it's fun to me to do that, but it is. And here's the thing. I don't think I am so great at explaining how to make stuff. But I think it can be entertaining to see somebody make something in a very, sorry, my headphones are driving me crazy, in a really unorganized and maybe not efficient way.
Oh, no. Well, that's what's so funny. You'll come back and you'll say, well, this didn't go the way I planned, but this is what you do. I mean, you're just so good. And it always looks great. What's the most popular Weeda Wednesday recipe that you've ever shared, where people can at least go look for that? I will say, Jan Morton, didn't you share her chocolate cobbler?
Her chocolate cobbler. Yes. So good. And her caramel cake. I made her caramel cake back in the last part of the summer. I don't know. I mean, I'm not good at like stats and all that kind of stuff. So I don't know what is technically the most popular.
Oh, just feedback, like the Mexican the Mexican cornbread blew me away.
And people really like the chocolate pudding recipe that my grandmother made and my mama made. Nothing fancy about it, but it's a great chocolate pie filling. And it tastes so good. It's delicious. And then recently I made Amy Hannon's recipe for cream cheese chicken enchiladas, and people love that because it's one of those things. It makes a ton. You can, if you eat leftovers, it's great for leftovers, but it's also great to take to somebody, and because it looks pretty, when you finish it. And so that's been one that people have liked. And then always pound cake. I don't know what it is about a pound cake, but people never get tired of trying them. It's just one of those classic things.
Well, and Weeda Wednesdays, have you ever had to put up I've seen occasionally there's no Weeda Wednesday, but almost always you're going to have. Now, what are you going to do when you run out? Will you run out of
recipes? Yeah. Probably. I mean, I don't know. I thought about it. And, I took a little time off last year this year, the first part of this year, because it was just a lot to try to do that when I was still at school and everything else. So I kind of know, I know what I'm making for the next 3 or 4 weeks. And then it seems like yesterday, I remembered that mama made this amazing poppy seed dressing to go on top of fruit. And I was like, oh, I'm going to do fruit and poppy seed dressing. Because what to me is always better when somebody else makes it is just cut up fruit. When somebody brings us a meal and there's fruit, it's never better. So it's like salad. It's always better if somebody else makes it. So anyway, so I like just something like that's really simple. But I don't know. I think to take somebody fresh fruit, if you're taking them a meal, and just to have a little container of poppy seed dressing, I just think that's so special. That's, it's just.
Yeah. I want that recipe. I don't have a good one for poppy seed dressing. Okay. So I've been buying Brianna's. So.
Okay. Mama's was fantastic. You grate an onion. That's what made it so good. You grate an onion.
Oh, okay. Well, I want you to stick that. I'll come get that from you. But okay. Now I want to start. First of all, you gave me a copy earlier, or maybe it was but I gave it to my Emma, who's at college. Thank you for not doing a book cover. This is absolutely, first of all, I remember when sweet Melanie was on the podcast for The Bright Side. I was holding up her book and I'd taken the cover off. And of course, it doesn't look anything like it's supposed to look, but this is beautiful. This is honestly, it feels like linen. It's got this gold and this laurel. This is a beautiful book.
Thank you.
And I love that you only have, this is all of a book cover you have.
Right, that little jacket.
Did you do that because you're like I am, you hate book covers?
Well, here's the thing. Here's why we did that. Because I think, especially with a devotional book, I wanted it to be a companion for whoever used it, like a companion for 100 days. So if you think about like an Emma, who's hopefully would take it from home back to college. And then if she goes to see a friend on the weekend, that cover is going to be a wreck.
Yeah.
in no time at all. So I like the idea of of everything being there, not having to keep up with the cover, and the book itself being really pretty, so that even when you finish it, if you want to set it out, it's still pretty.
Yes. And the spine is beautiful too. The white and the spine. Before we get into Grace Upon Grace, I think it's very relevant for those who might not know this. You wrote this for young girls, although it can apply to anyone.
Right.
And you have more experience with young girls than probably a lot of parents of young girls because you've spent more hours with them because you were at Briarwood Christian School. And FYI, that's where all three of my daughters went, and they all three, as does everyone, adores Sophie. Sophie, you are an icon, and you were at Briarwood.
Jamie,
and even though now my third one, and I think we talked about this at breakfast, you're not always appreciated until until they graduate and get a little wise, because when you're having to enforce dress code and do things like that if they're immature, it can be, difficult. But you were there for what, 21 years at Briarwood?
I was there for 21 years, 14 as an English teacher. And then the last 7, I was working with the girls. Technically, my last year there, I was going to move more into like a student activities role. But because of COVID, we couldn't do a lot of student activities. So my job looked a lot like it had before, with just a little bit more behind the scenes stuff with activities. So yeah, I was there for a long time.
And you had heart to hearts with a lot of girls that they probably didn't have with their parents, or didn't feel. I mean, you were a sounding board, you were a shoulder to cry on, and you were a piece of probably the only solid advice some of the girls got, because there's all ages, there's all backgrounds at Briarwood and all kinds of issues. And that's a hard age, high school, for girls. So is that one of the main things that inspired you to write Grace Upon Grace? How did that play into it?
Yeah, I think, I did have a lot of conversations with girls, and a lot of them honestly were about real low level things. They didn't like the way their shirt looked when they left the house, or they had an argument with their little brother, or they were super stressed out because they had 4 tests in a week. A lot of this stuff was just everyday stuff. And occasionally it would be serious, sometimes to the point where I would have to say, you know what, I can't know this if your parents don't know it. So we're going to have to loop them in. But more often than not, it was just, the everyday stuff. But the thing that came up over and over and over in the context of that job, and this is where Grace Upon Grace came from, was just the enormous amount of pressure they were putting on themselves. And if I felt that way when I was growing up, I don't remember it, but I don't think we had the mirror that they do with social media. And I don't ever want to make an enemy of social media. Like there's a lot of great things about it, but they just have, they have really high expectations for themselves. Our girls did. They had really high expectations for their relationships. And so the stress of trying to juggle all those things at such a high level will get to you. And so Grace Upon Grace was really a little bit for me, a chance to say, hey, you get to exhale. You don't have to be the best or the most perfect or the smartest or the most ambitious. Like you do get to rest in the grace of God. So I had the idea for it, and then we went home for quarantine. And so I actually started writing it, I guess, in April of quarantine, which was an interesting kind of environment to start a book in, because I didn't see anybody. But anyway, so it was just something I felt like hopefully would be an encouragement to them as they, just dealt with all the stuff they're dealing with.
Well, I will say, and we had this conversation at breakfast once, Emma, and I think she told you this, did not appreciate some of the advice, some of the wisdom that you and a lot of the teachers or adults shared, because in that bubble of high school, it is a very different kind of bubble. College might be somewhat of a bubble, but it's totally different.
Right.
You're not with people you grew up with, people that you've been with for almost 12 years. And according to her, and do you think that most people, they're going to really, really absorb and digest and be able to understand a lot of what's in this book that maybe they didn't appreciate maybe in junior high. But
Right.
although this is for any of them, this to me, been reading through a lot of these and they're very deep, but of course, in your humorous, lighthearted twist. I mean, who do you think is the ideal candidate for reading Grace Upon Grace? Although it's any teenager, even an adult, I love it for me.
I think anybody who just needs a minute to be still and who recognizes that they have a need to reflect maybe a little bit more than they do. I think the good thing about a book, as opposed to a conversation sometimes, is it's a little bit easier to internalize whatever lesson there is if you're just sitting by yourself. Sometimes if you're in a conversation and you feel like, somebody's trying to remind you of some truth or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not ready to hear that thing, or you just may not be ready to have a conversation about it.
Mm-hmm.
And in a book, you don't have to have a conversation. You can just accept with yourself. And I think that makes it a little bit easier. So I would say it absolutely anybody of any age, it would work. But I think for anybody who just feels a little weary and who feels like they have for whatever reason, they're dealing with some pressure and they just need to kind of get that back in perspective, I think it would be hopefully it would be a helpful book for them.
Mm-hmm. And to back up, it's not just for girls, it's for anyone.
It is, but I did write it with older teenage girls in mind, but because of the first one I did like this called All in All, I didn't expect it, but women more our age would email me or message me and say, hey, my daughter was doing this. And so I decided to do it too. And so I was a little bit more mindful of that this time around, that it might not just be teenagers who read it. And so I tried to at least consider that as I told whatever story I was telling.
Yeah. And Sophie, I find it intriguing that as the mom, a boy mom, you're a boy mom, a single, an only child, and you are so good with girls. I don't know if that's because I know you're a 9, you're a peacemaker, and you're very compassionate. What do you think makes you connect so well as you do with women of all ages, but especially girls? Because sometimes I feel more like maybe a boy mom or maybe the way boy moms are typical boy mom.
Oh gosh. I mean, I know I haven't connected with everybody. I feel like that's probably safe to say. And there have been some hard situations over the years that, just are what they are. But I think as much as I have been able to, I just really believe in letting people be who they are. In other words, not that you don't want to see the Lord do whatever he's going to do in somebody's life, not that there are not going to be things that he's going to shape and change and all that kind of stuff, but I'm not going to shape and change it. Right. Like I'm going to try as best I can to meet people where they are, compassionately and lovingly. And which is, by the way, one reason why dress code was so hard for me. And that's like the opposite of my personality, but that's neither here nor there. So just to let people be who they are. And I think when people learn over time that you're really not trying to change them into somebody they don't want to be, because that's the job of the Holy Spirit. That's, and whoever their Christian community is, but just as somebody who worked with the girls every day, to get to a place where you really can speak into difficult things with somebody takes a lot of relationship building. Even though when I started that job, I thought I was really going to fix some things. I was going to take care of some things. That's actually not how it goes. So it's a different relationship than a parent. It's just, you are more of a sounding board and hopefully more of just an older sister or like a fourth mom in the scale of moms. So there's not as much push and pull, I think, in that kind of relationship.
Yeah. Well, I want to ask you, were there times that when girls were confiding in you, now not about anything that would need to be divulged to their parents, but just maybe feeling less than, or the way, and maybe you saw how, I know personally, I fed into a lot of insecurities with my daughters, maybe by some of the way I would maybe share my opinions of what they were wearing, and we had that back and forth dress code, at home, that was hard. What are some things that you maybe in the quiet moments of your office when some of the students left, you thought, I wish Jamie knew this, or I wish, because it might make a total difference in that parent-child relationship, or even the way that child functioned in their world. Were there things that you saw? Because I know personally, there are things I would like to tell some of my friends who have boys, just from a girl mom perspective. So just from the perspective of Dean of Women and even a boy mom, what are some things that you maybe have thought, hey, wish they knew this?
Oh God, I don't know. I feel like by and large, I feel like I had strong enough relationships with most of the moms of the girls that I was talking to, where occasionally there would need to be maybe a conversation that was a little bit more direct. But just in general, I feel like the thing I said over and over and over was just continue to make home the safest place. Just continue to make home the safest place. Even a girl who is walking in a fair amount of security kind of in her head and her heart is likely still taking note of what is going on, that she is or is not being included in, of the places where for whatever reason she feels lesser than or not as equipped or whatever. So when home's the safest place, it just creates just a space for rest, really, from what's going on in your head more than anything else. And then I think the other thing is just like, hey, like every kid messes up. Your kid's not going to be perfect. And my kid's not perfect. Like nobody has a perfect child. And so in our attempts to create that, though, sometimes we just put a ton of pressure on kids, but it's nothing they can ever live up to. Like they're just not going to ever get there. And so that was always hard when you saw somebody who's just super stressed out. Sometimes I would want to say like, hey, I promise when she's 40, she's not going to have this much concern about the D she made on her calculus test. Like, it's like, that's just big picture. It's just not a big deal. But in the moment, those small things feel so huge. So sometimes I think want to say just like, could we just back off just a smidge? But so many times that's about our stuff much more than it's about our kids,
But we still sometimes pile it on our kids because of that.
Right. So, but again, I'm not a counselor, they don't necessarily care what I might think about that. So you just kind of had to be wise about when maybe to speak up and when to just let it go.
Yeah. I want to ask you this because as you're a boy mom and I'm a girl mom, and I heard someone say that on a podcast the other day, well, I don't think this is true of everyone, but his statement was, he said almost everyone when it's too late wishes they'd had more children. And I don't agree with that. Some people don't, but I've always thought, boy, I wish I'd had at least one boy. Do you ever wish you had, in addition to Alex, a girl, or are you just fine with the daughter-in-law you're going to get one day?
I'm fine. Like, I don't know, at some point, Alex may think, gosh, I wish they'd had another kid. I would love to have had a sibling, or, when he gets married, what, I don't know, but I can't change any of that. And I have always been a strangely content mom of one child. A friend of mine said to me years and years and years ago, we both had her first child and Alex at the same time. And we were talking about the possibility of a second. And she said, I think every family is a perfect family. And I kind of do too. I think every family is a perfect family. And I don't. I mean, I guess maybe if I ever have a little twinge, I think, what will it be like for Alex when he, when we get older and he feels the burden of that. But I can't change it. And so I trust the Lord with whatever is ahead for him. And I will look forward to having a great daughter-in-law one day if he gets married. And I don't know. I just think I've had so many great relationships with girls, and I haven't been their mom. They have wonderful moms, but I haven't felt a void at all.
Yeah. And that's why I feel like that's possibly one reason you've got such a great relationship with so many girls that you had at Briarwood. I mean, those were your spiritual daughters. We all have, met people
And I think a lot of people, and I have this whole thing too, and this is a little bit of a rabbit trail, but I just don't think we need to make motherhood the end all be all of a woman's existence, because there are people who are not going to have children, who are not going to marry, and their impact in their communities and in their churches and in the places where they work can be huge, and also such healthy, good fruit from those spiritual children. And so I don't know. I guess to me, I think our lives are meant to be lived relationally. And sometimes those relationships are primarily the ones in our houses. Sometimes those relationships are outside of our houses. And I feel like I've been really fortunate to have a little bit of both.
Now you're about to be an empty nest, and you are a huge Mississippi State fan, alum, how do you say alumni? If it's just singular, alumni,
alumnus, is that right?
Oh, that's right. It's alumnus. If you're one, right. What do you think the chances are that he'll go there and you'll get to go there as much as you want and have a great excuse?
I don't think. I will be surprised if that's where he ends up.
Really?
Now, I think he'll always love it. And I think we'll always cheer for State.
Yeah.
And never say never. But right now, I would say the odds are strong he will end up somewhere else.
Yeah. Yeah. Did David go to State?
He did.
Is that where y'all met?
No. We grew up together.
Okay. Remind me where in Mississippi you grew up.
In Meridian.
Okay.
So we grew up together, known each other. Can't remember not knowing each other.
Wow.
And I've been the more obsessive sports fan of the two of us, just because he likes to watch at home.
Yeah.
But I grew up going to games with my daddy. And so that has always been like one of my favorite things. Yeah. So no matter where Alex ends up, I think we'll have a good time supporting whatever school it is. But I don't think he's going to be a Mississippi State Bulldog. I'll be surprised. I'll be happy if he is, but I'll also be happy as long as he feels like he's where he needs to be.
Yeah. Well, okay. I want to because this is very important to my followers. Food's a big deal. We get a lot of requests on, Thanksgiving, what's going to be on the Thanksgiving menu. And I am going to share with my people. I'm going to try to get the ingredients together and have some of my people walk through making my grandmother's cornbread dressing like a few weeks before Thanksgiving, because it freezes beautifully, and just sort of have that off the table.
Right.
Because cornbread dressing that my grandmother, I will say, now I'm sure there's some out there that's as good, maybe better, but to me, it was the best. And my mother deconstructed it with grandmother before she died. And it's fabulous. And it's so easy. So that's all. Thanksgiving's not Thanksgiving without that cornbread dressing. I mean, it would not happen. What is never going to not be at your Thanksgiving table?
Cornbread dressing is one of those. I mean, we'll never not have cornbread dressing, but probably the second thing, maybe even more important to David and Alex, is squash casserole.
Yes.
Squash casserole is always going to be part of the Thanksgiving meal. Okay. So it's your really
recipe, good. I've seen it before, and I need to copy it. Is it on your Instagram, or where do we go to get that? Can you share it with me for the show notes?
I can share it with you for the show notes. Yes. I think it's actually, I don't know if it's on my blog, but I did do it one time for Weeda Wednesday. So there's a little screenshot of that. So.
What makes it different? Does it have, I know it's got butter.
Butter.
You boil your squash, right?
And you boil the squash with your onion, because sometimes squash casserole will call for diced onion, but to me it interferes, because I don't want crunchy. I want it more like a souffle texture.
Yes.
So you boil the onion with the squash, which gives the squash a really good flavor. And squash is one of those things you have to get after it from the beginning, or it won't have any flavor at all.
Right.
And so, it's like a potato.
Along the way, do you boil yours in chicken broth?
Yeah, I usually use a little bit of chicken stock and water, and then 2 tablespoons of butter, some onion, and then the squash. And then I cook that, and then you have to mash it like crazy to get all the water out of it. And then you mix it with cream cheese, sour cream, cheddar cheese, and egg, and combine all that. And then most of the time I do crushed Cheez-Its on top. So
instead of the Ritz.
instead of the Ritz.
Okay. And Sophie, I'm going to tell you, it's been life-changing talking about the squash and all that liquid. I have started using a nut milk bag.
Yes, I've seen you talk about that.
I have never, it is the most life-changing. I used to use like paper towel and it would always break and everything would fall through. And then I did cheesecloth. I've actually broken cheesecloth, but you know, I squeeze everything, rice, cauliflower, squash. What else? There was something else that had to be squeezed.
Zucchini?
Yes, zucchini. Anyway, it is almost like a mesh nylon, and it's the most wonderful thing.
Okay.
Get one before you will not have to mash one thing. Please, I'll send you the link. It's amazing because the water can ruin a casserole real quick.
Yeah, it can. Oh gosh, that's the worst when you take a casserole out of the oven and it's in a puddle.
Which it wouldn't happen with you, but like if in explaining to someone the importance of squeezing that water out, if they don't know, it is important. So you've got okay, now I know you are not a turkey girl.
I don't love turkey. I don't. And Mama made a delicious turkey breast, but I don't love it. And you know, honestly, the reason why I don't love it is because one year I got sick. And so I have a little bit of an aversion. Like I've had a 10-year stretch where I was not super fond of turkey. So
was it, you know, it was from the turkey?
Yeah. I'm because we all got sick.
Oh, okay. So what do y'all have? Do you do ham? What do y'all do?
No, usually, I don't know. It just depends. A lot of times I'll do pork tenderloin or some kind of, pork loin kind of thing. I think is really good. Usually I do on Christmas, I usually do filet. So I don't do a red meat on Thanksgiving. Not that anybody's keeping score. I just kind of, I kind of know, but I would say more often than not, I'm going to do something with either I'm going to stuff a pork loin or I'm going to do a really good pork tenderloin or something like that for Thanksgiving Day.
Okay. So you'll have that and you'll have cornbread dressing. And is it your mom's? Weeda?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Do you put chicken in it?
I do chicken and dressing. It's like a separate main dish on other occasions, but for Thanksgiving, no, I don't put chicken in it. Okay. And I also, Mama did not like poultry seasoning and she did not like sage. So it's none of that. She really didn't like sage. So, but it's so good. It's so flavorful. And then squash casserole, always sweet potato casserole. Mama would eat sweet potato casserole for dessert every time on Thanksgiving. That was her fave.
Oh, do you do marshmallows on your sweet potato? Did she do it?
I did. We did pecans on ours, like the pecan crust.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'll do corn. Sometimes I won't do corn. And I'll always do baby lima beans. We love baby lima beans and they're a good side.
That's
Thanksgiving. And then I like a congealed salad, but I'm increasingly in the minority where that's concerned. I feel like
well, I grew up, we just always had one.
Yeah.
My people just aren't, there's always a big half the pan left over.
And it's hard. It's hard to repurpose a congealed salad with your leftovers, but I love it. I think it's so good with the cornbread dressing. The congealed salad's so good with it. So I love that, but nobody else does.
Well, do you do a cranberry sauce or cranberry congealed salad of any sort?
Yeah, I do. I love a cranberry congealed salad. I've done fresh cranberries the last few years, but again, nobody likes them like I do. Like last year, I think I just got somebody to give me some plum jelly and I just used plum jelly. I was like, well, if I want something sweet to balance out the dressing, I'll just use plum jelly, and nobody cared.
Well, and y'all don't have to worry about this, but to me, turkey has got to have some kind of cranberry or something because it's and we always do a smoked turkey that's fabulous, but that with cornbread dressing, it will turn your mouth inside out if you don't have something sweet to balance it. But,
you're exactly right.
So now, did you ever grow up? Did any of your people do oyster casserole? One of my grandmothers did that every year. Now, no, it's not happened since she passed, but was that a thing? your table?
No, I was not far enough south for that. Like, I think in South Mississippi, like deep South Mississippi, that was a thing. Oyster dressing, I know in Baton Rouge was a thing. And I'm intrigued by it, but I don't know that I would get a lot of takers. My daddy would love it. I think my sister would love it. But there was also, when we lived in Baton Rouge, there was always oh shoot, what do they call it? There was a sausage dressing that they would do. That was a whole
dirty rice or
like
boudin.
Well, it's kind of like a dirty rice, but a little heartier. I never learned how to make it, but it was delicious. But we were always just cornbread dressing. That was it.
So is that what's going to be on? Do you have any other recipes you're going to try, or do you do dessert at all?
I'll start looking probably in the next few weeks. I'll start kind of wanting to figure it out. I usually like to try one new thing, some new side that I think sounds good, especially vegetables. I love vegetables. So I love finding new ways to serve them. But I'll start to figure it out. And then one of my great joys in life is making the Thanksgiving grocery list. You probably like this too. I love to make the grocery list. I love to get that thing real organized, and I know I'm going to have to go 2 or 3 places. All that's super fun. So I'll start planning before too long, because hopefully we're going to all be in the same place this year. Last year we weren't. We were by ourselves. So this year I think will be more of a family event.
So if people want to see what your grocery list turns out to be, I'm sure you'll share it on your Instagram.
I'll put a picture on Instagram once I get it made.
Okay.
So, and I'm assuming I can. I don't know. I make my grocery list now in an app, so it may be hard to get a picture. But
what app is that? I need a grocery list app. I've been putting things in notes, and it's getting all like in that notes app, and it's not working.
I use the To-Do app because you can make categories, and I have a category just for groceries, and then I have a separate category like for Costco, because to me that's a separate list. So, but it's just to do. It's a Microsoft app, and it's easy. But you just click them as you fill your cart, and it goes away. So it's easy.
Well, Sophie, on a whole nother episode, when you said Costco, I thought, I want to know everything Sophie buys at Costco, everything Sophie buys at Trader Joe's and Fresh Market. So will you, if you ever are twiddling your thumbs, which won't happen, will you think about coming back to do our favorites? Because that's always fun.
I love talking about that kind of stuff. You're a great Trader Joe's shopper. I learned a lot about Trader Joe's stuff from you. And I'm very specific on Costco. I don't ever go in Costco without a list. I don't just roam and look. Like I go and I have a purpose when I go in.
Now, is that where you won't spend $500 like I do? Cause I'm roaming around.
That's how I don't spend. That's honest to goodness. So I don't spend $500, because that's what happens. You start going like, this would be great. And you don't realize that it could feed a family of 10.
Yeah.
And what do you do with it? So Costco for a family of 3. I mean, I have to be pretty judicious, just because I don't have a need, to have all that stuff on hand. So, but golly, there are things I love.
Yeah. What is there one thing for Thanksgiving that you always get there are you going to have to make a Thanksgiving trip to Costco for certain things? Like I always get my lamb there for Easter typically. But is there anything there? You just have a Costco list around the
it's more like home, just general staples that I get at Costco. Like I like to get chicken at Costco because it's in the little individual packets. But it's usually it's nothing specific, I don't think, for Thanksgiving. Although their produce is really good if you need a lot of it. That's a good place to get it.
Yeah. Well, we'll keep up with all of that. And Sophie, thank you. It's always a pleasure. And
I love talking to you, Jamie. You know that.
Well, Sophie, thank you. And then for the book, I'm sure it's on. I will link to it in the show notes. I'll link to all of your social media. But if this, I will say, because I'm all about a good gift list, this book would be, if there's any woman, but especially young adult woman, teenager, this is it right here. It's beautiful. It's full of wisdom, and it's on Amazon. I'm sure it's many places.
Yeah, I think pretty much anywhere you like to buy books.
This to me would be the perfect gift. So anyway,
Thanks.
Sophie, thank you. I'm going to let you get back to your day, and I hope to see you again really soon.
Thanks, Jamie. Love talking to you.
Okay, you too, my friend.
Bye.